an app on his device, on his iPad, which I've got here as well. And since we're working with HTML, we're working with CSS and JavaScript and PhoneGap, any presentation framework, any library that you would use on the web, you can use from an application as well. So I thought that was an awesome idea. Can't take credit for it because Simon's here. So thank you, Simon, for the inspiration. So to start this talk, we're just going to go ahead and open up the app on the bottom right of my home screen here and hope for the best. So again, Steve mentioned my talk was actually, the name on the ticket is the working title, heavily inspired by the second most memorable talk now that I've seen at PhoneGap Day, next to playing an RPG live on stage, making real shit. So this is making enterprise shit. So, like Steve said, my name is Bruce Lefebvre. I am a developer at Adobe. I've been with Adobe for 5 years now, working on AEM, and most recently working on bringing AEM and PhoneGap together. And I have opinions. And one of those opinions is that I don't think enterprise software necessarily has to suck. And I'm sure we've all used a piece of enterprise software that was built to support Internet Explorer 6, or perhaps it even requires an earlier version of Internet Explorer. I know we have a few of those hanging around here. And I think AEM, our product that I work on, is a prime example of enterprise software which decidedly does not suck. So, Steve, we're going to get things back on track. I'm going to keep things short. What I wanted to go over today was a quick crash course on what Adobe's Experience Manager product is in order to introduce AEM Mobile. I'll give a little crash course, talk about some open source goodness that you can try today without having to deal with AEM in any way. And I'll go into a demo that I managed to get away with last time, but we'll see if I get so lucky this time around. So whenever I introduce AEM, I like to put up this quote from someone who apparently used to work at Google. And they were quoted on Twitter as saying, "Managing content is hard. We tried it at Google and decided to focus on easier stuff like self-driving cars." Again, I have no way to verify the validity of this quote, but it is a decidedly difficult space. There's lots of interesting problems to solve in content management system, and our solution is one of those out there that addresses these problems. So Adobe Experience Manager, I like to describe it as a content management system that can do anything. And some of those things that it can do, or rather, it's the joy of not having speaker notes. When you look at this slide, this is some of the brands, a few of them you may recognize, that are actually using our product. I just wanted to point out one. On the top row, fourth from the left, is, of course, a logo you likely recognize. We are the first customer for any release of Adobe Experience Manager, and that means Adobe.com and many of our internal sites as well are all running Experience Manager before we ever ship a beta to a customer. And again, some of the things that Experience Manager can do, we talk a lot about creating, managing, and optimizing these mobile experiences, and I'm using that word a lot. I like to think of an experience as any time a customer or a user interacts with your brand, whether that be via the traditional website, a responsive site, a mobile site, perhaps a digital publication, perhaps a mobile application. These are all opportunities you have to engage with that customer and to potentially make a sale. It has a really unique feature in the world of enterprise software in that it actually is just a double click to install. And if you've ever installed any large-scale enterprise systems yourself, you're probably familiar with first installing a database management system, perhaps running some scripts to bootstrap a number of tables that the system requires. Maybe you run an app server if you're running Java, and then actually deploying some WAR files onto that server to make your application run. This is very different than AEM in that you have to have Java installed, of course, but you can simply double-click and you will have a fully functional enterprise-grade content management system running, just like that. It has a touch-friendly user interface. That's part of the reason I like to demo from an iPad, is that everything, all the tools that I'm going to use today can be used from a touch UI. And we keep hearing that we are the last generation that will know about a mouse or that will use a mouse. And I really do think that is true, and that it's really future-friendly and forward-facing of AEM to embrace this touch-friendly UI already. And of course, when you're building a CMS as a developer, you'll often be building templates and components, And in support on AEM, we have support for Java server pages, ECMAScript pages, more of a JavaScript server-side language, and an open source Adobe Apache language, Sightly. And lastly, Experience Manager is built on an open foundation. And when I meant talk about that open foundation, Apache, or AEM rather, has very strong roots in the Apache Foundation. So some of the tools that we build our CMS upon include, number one, the web application framework, Sling. If you're coming from the Node world, think of parallel to Express or another web application framework. If you're in the Java space, perhaps Spring Framework might sound familiar. So it's the framework that actually maps a request made to your system to the appropriate servlet or script on the server side to handle that request. We use a fully featured OSGI container, Apache Felix, and every bundle that you load, your customer's code, your own code, can all be deployed without a restart into that system. So a very powerful framework. Another Apache project, Lucene, provides full text search throughout the content repository. And on that note, again, I mentioned there is no need to have a database management system installed. There is a content repository built into the Experience Manager, what we call the Quick Start. This is another Apache project, Apache Jackrabbit Oak. And this Java content repository is a hierarchical data persistence layer. It was championed by, or the standard rather, behind this standard, I guess, was actually David Nuchler of Adobe back when the product was named CQ, and it was being developed at a company called Day Software based out of Switzerland. So it's an entirely open specification that we are simply building an implementation on top of. And it is fast and scalable. Again, I showed that customer list. Those are real customers that are using our product for their large-scale web deployments. All right, AEM Mobile. So this is a combination, of course, of AEM and PhoneGap. And just a few highlights here, and we'll get right into the demo. Number one, you're able to manage all these different applications that your brand or your company or customers might have from one central location, this apps dashboard. And from there, you can deal with the metadata of these applications. You can decide where they will fetch their updates from, which services they'll be configured to use. Different aspects of Adobe's Marketing Cloud can all be configured for consumption from within the app. A large feature, of course, of a content management system is enabling those non-technical users to actually work with that system and produce meaningful changes for either the website, the publication, or in this case, the application. In the last presentation, we talked a lot about, we heard about a number of solutions for actually pushing code over the air. We have a solution as well to provide over-the-air updates, which is built on a PhoneGap plugin built by a number of members actually of the PhoneGap team in this room called Content Sync. And I mentioned these services we can integrate with. One is the ability to collect and analyze the application's usage with mobile services. And lastly, the ability to personalize that application for whoever is logged in, whoever is viewing the app with Adobe Target. And this will be part of the demo that we get into. So a few other things. We have a PhoneGap Enterprise Viewer application, which you can download for free from the App Store on Apple's App Store and the Google Play Store. And this is a parallel to the PhoneGap Developer app, but for an enterprise space. So you need to authenticate with an AEM instance, and you can view all the applications in different states of deployment on that instance. Of course, you can engage users with push notifications sent directly from the system. And a brand new feature is the ability to take an existing Cordova or PhoneGap application, actually import that into the system, and begin to add content as appropriate from AEM. In the past, you would have had to do a fairly major rewrite if you had an existing app. Now you can simply bring that existing app in and begin making portions of the application that are required to be edited by a non-technical user, as an example, begin editing those with the system itself. A few examples of these apps in the wild. We had CocaCola build an app for their their field team or their ambassador staff. This is a view of the app just in the App Store on Android. It's got a fairly nice review, and when you first start up the app, you get a really nice visual tour. And it provides these ambassador folks with an ability to pull up product data on various products in that catalog, figure out which bottling partners are relevant for a given region, and generally provide a toolbox of resources for them. And again, just worth emphasizing, there's no prescribed look and feel. The designers on your team have complete control over how that application would be presented, as they do with any other PhoneGap application. We had a conference at Adobe recently, just in late 2015. It was the Worldwide Sales Conference. Another example of how an AEM app can be presented. In this case, we're having a customized schedule for every user that logs into that application. At this particular conference, there were a combination of partners and Adobe employees, so there were kind of two different tracks, and you would only be given the schedule based on which sessions you had signed up for. And another view, of course, when you're in Vegas, it's nice to be able to bring up a map and find your way home. And lastly, last year there was a app built for the European conference, PhoneGap Day Amsterdam. And this app, again, was another example of how we were able to put together an application really quickly for the workshop. You may recognize some faces from the speaker list there. And there was a venue, of course, and you can navigate back to the hotel. So that was a few examples. Again, there's no prescribed way that an AEM mobile app might look. You have complete control over that, and you have all the power of any existing Cordova plugin or any Cordova plugin your team chooses to develop on its own as well. All right, so I have a few backup slides here, but we're going to go directly into AEM itself. And so the situation here, I'm demoing, of course, from an iPad. And if I open up Safari, I'll be taken directly to an AEM instance that's located in my hometown of Ottawa, and it's connected over VPN. There's literally 15 different things that could go wrong, but we're going to go for it. So if this is your first time seeing AEM, immediately when you launch that, double-click install of what we call the Quick Start. You'll be taken directly into the projects view of our touch-first UI. So on the left-hand rail, we can navigate this demo. We're going to be spending our time in the Apps console. And this will present a list of all the applications that I currently am managing from this instance. So you can see I have what Geometrics is, a fictitious company that we use as part of a sample to demonstrate some product capabilities. And towards the right, I have the PhoneGap Day Talk application. So this is the application that's actually running behind the presentation I was just showing you. So if we give that a tap, we'll be taken to this application's dashboard. And there's a couple of neat things you can do when you have this type of dashboard that's being used to manage all your applications. Number one, a few things you can do just with the dashboard itself. Depending on your role, you may wish to bring the Analyze Metrics tile into the forefront. This is all completely configurable. You can see a high-level overview of how your app is doing. This application, it looks like I've only launched it 39 times. Of course, it's a publicly available app. Hopefully that would be a little bit higher. And on the right-hand side, we have that Manage App tile, where I can configure a number of properties on this application, including if you attended Tim's workshop yesterday preparing your application for submission to the App Store, you would know that, pulling this metadata together and actually collecting screenshots is part of that process, and you can do this all from within AEM. So you can set up, for example, you'll notice the last line of text where the application will actually pull its updates from. You can configure some more advanced data and actually set up those screenshots for the different platforms. And a brand new feature of that enterprise viewer that I mentioned is you can actually take the screenshot directly from the viewer and upload it back to the system, so it's very seamless. But for this demo, I wanted to focus a little bit further down on the Manage Content tile. You'll notice we have an English line here, an entry. And if we tap on this, I'm currently only supporting the English locale, but I could support any number of other localizations of this app. And it'll open up into a view of the content behind my application. If we dig in a little bit deeper, we'll see a representation, in this case, of all the slides from my app. So, the Making Enterprise Stuff slide at the top left, all the way down to all the slides that are actually part of my deck. And in this case, I wanted to focus on one slide in particular that shows off some of the integrations with the other tools in the Adobe Marketing Cloud, and that is the ability to personalize these applications. So if I hit select, I'm going to choose this Target in Action slide, and I can open that up using the top rail. I've actually already opened it up to speed things up. So we have this nice slide with, it has some text at the top, it has an image, and it has a control at the bottom, which I'll get into in a second. So if you're, there's many Canadians here, a lot of hockey fans, I'm assuming. I know we've got a couple anyway. Where there's some rivalries if you live in Ottawa. And, there's a number of hockey teams that you can cheer for. And, of course, there's the Ottawa Senators, which are a fairly new team that came to the league in '92, I believe. And if you're a little bit older, you might be cheering for another team. There's Toronto and Montreal, which are on either sides of Ottawa. So I'm going to do a demo here where I can actually target what's going to be shown on this slide depending on the age of the person viewing it. So to do this, what I'm going to do, I'll switch into edit mode. And from edit mode, I can edit any of these items up on this slide. And keep in mind, this is a slideshow app, but you could draw the parallel to any other application, being able to edit that text. As a developer, I know I spend a lot of time with client requests or requests from my boss. Oh, can you tweak this a little bit? Can you change the wording? Can you change the store hours? This really empowers that marketing person or that author to offload some of that work to them to free you up to actually develop the application. So if we hit the edit, we can make a quick change to the target demo text. Let's just change that to something generic. This will serve as kind of the default offer. If we do not know anything about our user, we will be showing them this content. So we'll just put in, something generic, NHL, hide that keyboard, hit OK. And so this would be a fine slide, but we actually want to target it for those two users. And for the sake of this demo, we'll be targeting the young crowd, which are likely cheering for the Ottawa team, and the older crowd, which are perhaps cheering for the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm going to enter into targeting mode. Again, that was the drop-down on the top right. And from here, there's some target jargon where I can actually choose the brand and the activity. We'll gloss over that for the sake of speeding up this demo and simply hit that start targeting. So here's a pretty intuitive UI where I can see right now I'm looking at the default view. And if I wanted to add some content to target to that younger audience, I could simply hit this younger selector here. And from here, I can tap, whoops, I skipped a step by accident. I need to hit each one of the components that I wish to target and hit that bullseye. So I'm going to target the text and I'm going to target that image. And now I can click through into younger and I can add an offer. In this particular case, I'm just going to change that text to say, to identify for these younger users, this is your team. We'll put go send, whoops, what have I done? Go sends. Hide the keyboard, we'll hit OK. And I mentioned we're going to target that image as well. That didn't work at all. Let's try that again. Okay, so we'll change that text. How does it know which target I select?
I don't see anything indicating which of those three targets it's
So
selected.
right at the top, I'll just hide my keyboard here. Oh, you're right. You're right. Good point. Okay, so it did actually persisted. That was a good eye. Thank you very much. So we did actually set that. It's a little bit jumpy. This I'm using a Reveal.js template. It doesn't map extremely well to authoring. So we're going to, for the image, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to target that image. I don't know why that keyboard keeps coming up. But in this case, I'm simply going to open what we call the side panel. That's great. And we're going to drag a relevant image from the digital asset management feature of this system. Of course, we'll take that Ottawa Senators logo, simply drag that over and drop it. And for the next step, we'll just target, that's awesome. We'll just target the older users of our app. I wish there was a way to get rid of that. Okay. I needed the gigantic iPad. I really do. So we're going to go in and edit that. I actually need that text, and now it goes away. Okay, go, and the Montreal team sometimes called the Habs. So we'll say go Habs, and we'll hit the OK button, and of course we're going to drag in a Montreal image as well to complete our little demo here. Again, we'll open up that asset browser. You can search if you don't see it right there on the forefront. Montreal, hit enter, and well, there it is. Perfect. And a few different hats. Excellent. We'll drag that image over, drop it on the page, and now our targeting is complete. So we can go back and review it and say, okay, for the default user we know nothing about, we'll give them a generic NHL offer. For the younger crowd, we're going to, and perhaps they're Sens fans, we'll take a little gamble there. And then for the older crowd, we'll say go Habs. The next step, we'll hit next, and this is actually going to be persisted. Just configuring our mapping here. I did that beforehand, so we're all good. And this is actually going to be persisted to a different system, the Adobe Target systems, which I believe are actually co-located here somewhere in Utah. So that part actually went very quickly. Excellent. The next little step before we deploy this to our app, it's kind of a neat feature of AEM where you can actually preview this content directly from within AEM. So we have a preview mode which gives us a fairly good rendering of how this application will behave. And we can actually target it directly from AEM to different users that we have in the system to simulate how that user would see the application. So you'll notice that we have on the second bar there, we have this persona. And from here, we can actually preview how these different users will view this application. So let's pick a young person. We'll say Iris. And if all goes well, oh dear. Let's try someone a little older. Carlene, is it going to work for Carlene? The demo gods. We'll give this one more second. Sometimes it does take a minute to head off and actually synchronize these offers with, again, it is a separate system, the Adobe Target servers. And once that is done, the last step of our demo is we're actually going to push this update to the application, and we're going to view these offers from the app. So I actually have had this happen before where this mode is a little bit particular. So we're going to assume that worked, and we're going to try to proceed with the rest of the demo, see how that goes. So the last step, assuming that that targeting had worked, is we're going to head back into our dashboard for this application, and we're going to scroll down one tile further to the content release tile. And this is the tile you would actually use to push out updates to this application. So we'll tap through using our English, what we call a content package. Again, you can make these as granular or as all-encompassing as you'd like. This one is just targeting the English locale. We'll go ahead and do what we call stage an update, and this does not push an update out immediately because in most cases you would want to review this change on a real device or on a series of devices before you make that change live. So let's go ahead and say, adding targeted content. We'll say done, and at this point, using the Enterprise Viewer app, I could go in and actually test out this staged content on real devices. I could have a device wall that's connected to this AEM instance and preview this before I make it go live. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and publish that update. We'll do it live. And with that target content item going green, this update has actually been pushed out to my application. So again, we were working in the browser here. I'm going to switch back to my application, which contains a target. I love it when it takes me back to the start. So it actually contains this target slide already. Quickly navigate through, and you'll see it doesn't have that NHL text at the top. That was a change that we made. And this little control, I didn't want to have to bother logging in and logging out of the app, so I made a little control to target the age. And of course, we haven't applied that change yet, so this does nothing right now. I built the cheesiest gesture of all time into this application to trigger an update, and that is the shake. So with a shake, it'll actually phone home to that server URL that we configured and see if there's an update available to this application. In this case, we staged and published that update, so there is an update available. So we're going to go ahead and hit that update button, and we now should be presented with that default offer. So this is the offer where we don't know who the person is. We're giving them the generic offer. And now we can go ahead and actually preview what a user that we know their age would see in the application. So with any luck, let's give this a try. Target 30. Awesome. Okay. So just a little glitch there with author mode when we were previewing it, but it does appear to be working. So for our younger users, we'll see the sends offer, and if we switch to an older user, like my good pal Simon, we will see go Habs. All right, thank you. So, Adobe Target in action. Again, I want to show a little slide here, just about done. There are a number of other variables that you can actually target from within the application. You see them down in the bottom right. You can target not only age and ranges, but you can also target the profile about me. You can target the gender. You can target the name. There's any number of different ways that you can combine these different segments and produce a really unique app experience. And it usually does work from that drop-down, so demo gremlins. I'm glad it worked out in the end. We also used content sync. And content sync is the mechanism we use to actually update that application content over the air. And content sync is awesome. Again, no app store needed. If you've ever been on a project that has a really strict timeline, you need to push that update out. You can relate that sometimes the app store approval process can be a little tricky. So this allows you to push these content updates out without going back to the app store. They are what we call delta updates. So it is actually only the difference in what changed. You'll notice that update through a VPN to Ottawa took relatively no time. It included a couple of images and a bit of HTML, and that was all that was needed. And it is open source. So I know a number of folks in this room have contributed to this plugin. You can actually use this plugin entirely without AEM for your own application. It is available. It's one of the PhoneGap plugins available on GitHub and available on NPM for immediate use. So with that, I have a number of links here to actually the repository for this application, a few other getting started links, and I will post a link to an HTML version of these slides. And with that, I really hope you enjoy the rest of PhoneGap Day, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Bruce.